So, first of all, I'll give you some brief background about Berg. You may not have heard of us. We're a firm, we're based in Manchester. We get an awful lot of work from the southeast, but we are based in Manchester. We have basically a consulting room that we use in London. Been going for 35 years. We had our birthday last year, and we've very much been at the forefront of challenging in a number of different industries. Over the last few years, we've been challenging the banks very heavily around the derivative products, the mis-selling of the hedge products, that type of thing. And we've had some huge successes for many, many customers, which is quite surprising given we're a firm of 50 people. We turn over just shy of £5 million, and yet we go up against the banks on a very regular basis. We're not conflicted. We don't sit on a panel with any of those banks. And in fact, as a law firm, we actually decided to move our banking away from one of the major banks about 4 years ago and put it with one of the smaller new startup banks, because we believe that that's kind of the future of banking and probably more, hopefully more honourable going forward. In terms of the areas we offer, it's on the slide. Brief background on myself. I was with Irwin Mitchell until the turn of this year. I was there for 11 years as operations director for their business legal services division. Big law and the area of law that we're all in have got many, many similarities. I have to echo what was said in an earlier session as well, to say the reason that I'm in this part of the industry now is because I believe there's actually a real future for our size of firm. The big firms have their own issues, their own battles, their own successes. At this level, we can do something quite different. So I'm going to try and take you through some of the thoughts, practices that I had in my previous life, and also take you through some of the points that we're actually working to at the moment in Berg since I joined. What I would also say is, because these slides are going to be on the internet afterwards, I haven't, for obvious reasons, included every detail about how we go about doing some of this. I'm going to be around till about 4 o'clock. Please, if you'd like to have more of a conversation, give me a shout. I'm more than happy to take you through some more of the detail, but for obvious reasons, I'm not going to put everything up on these. So, in terms of the session, I'm going to talk through more about setting the price, the ways of doing it, how you can do it in the best way. And given the survey results, given that one of the points, it's dependent on the service, was the answer to the second question I posed, I think it's particularly important. How to negotiate the work. I'm not going to give you a session on negotiation skills. You can get a course on that somewhere else. But it's the criticality of that stage you go through and how often we all can put the wrong price in and result in a loss, that type of thing. And then how we deliver the work, managing to a price. And finally, how we review the price at the end and how important the data metrics are in actually doing that. Okay. Before I go on to the next slide, I just would like to understand, in terms of the audience, how many of you are actually registered solicitors practicing? Or registered, so registered to start with, and then I'll go into practicing. So registered, okay, and who's still practicing? Okay, great, thank you. So that's 4 or 5 of you. Great, thank you. So, you know all this. It's incredibly competitive, the market we're in. There are 10,000 plus law firms, the last statistic that I actually looked. Rupert's comments were that the internet, etc., will probably reduce the number of law firms down. Tend to agree with him. I think it's had a massive impact on us. We've got reduced budgets compared to being able to compete with the larger firms, and our cost basis, unless we've gone on a virtual basis, our cost base is probably increasing with premises costs, wage inflation, that type of thing. We have the challenge that the larger firms don't necessarily have. Knights was given as an example earlier. Achieving the economies of scale. I know that for a fact, having moved to Berg and looked at the level of infrastructure that we've got in proportion to the number of fee earners. And it's something we need to be able to grow our base, but it carries a big impact on our margin. So, from a legal IP perspective, a bit of background, we've actually, as an industry, done very well up until 2008. Clients have paid for work based upon the seniority of the lawyer, the time taken. And the hourly rate model was very much geared up around that, allows for the inefficiencies that are there. We actually did very well, and the question that I've got is, are we assuming that clients will really perceive the benefit and are prepared to pay for that anymore? Because I have to say, the recession and Google, as I mentioned, have had a significant impact on that. I can't remember who it was actually on the panel earlier, but somebody said they search on Google for, clients search on Google for solutions and answers. I'm aware from my previous life, not my current one, of quite senior lawyers relying on Google for some of their precedent advice as well, which is quite interesting that you've got lawyers out there doing it. Lawyers who actually are 3-4 years qualified, and they see that as actually a better source of information. So that's quite interesting. If they're doing that, then in-house counsel, et cetera, are going to do that as well. So the industry is changing around us, we know that. So clients still use law firms to solve their business problems. That fundamentally still exists. And our job is, from a Berg point of view, we help them to manage those risks and we help them to grow their businesses. We've got many clients who have been with us for years, who started off as startups, and they're now very, very large SMEs in the sort of the Northwest, doing very well. Last year, 80% of our work came from existing clients. So we've got a very loyal client base, which is a good thing in one way, and presents some challenges going forward. Prices are linked to the problems that we choose to solve. To do that, we've got to understand where we fit into that mix. Now, this isn't my model. So I've taken this from a textbook that's been in 3 or 4 textbooks that I've read. But effectively, the work we do is broken down into 4 parts. Has anybody else seen this model, by the way? Yeah, great, Paul, fine. Where I was, previous life, we very much focused on the commodity work as a core part of what the offering was. Actually, the firm I'm now in, we focus on the betting the company, the high strategic value, and operational piece. And that's quite a marked difference. Now, Irwin Mitchell do also pick up on bet the company. They cover the whole spectrum, but they have a large part that's on commodity, which is a scaled business, which allows them to basically do the work at very, very fixed price. From a value point of view to a company, and this is a particular theme that I'm going to go through as we go through this, obviously, the higher up the spectrum you get, the less work there is. But in terms of the value to the organisation, it's actually high as well. So less work out there of that type, but it is of high value. It is therefore very much not price sensitive. Now, in the market we are in, that very much plays out for us. That plays out for us on some of our corporate work and a large part of our litigation work. However, we also do an awful lot of work that is more price sensitive around the high value, high strategic value and the operational side of things. And fixed costs come into play very, very heavily there. Alternative pricing structures come into play there. But what we've spent a lot of time doing over the last couple of months is trying to get the teams to understand far more about the relationship they have with the clients and what that means in terms of when they come to the pricing. In the past, we very much focused on competing on a price basis with other firms. We've won work on that basis, but we've also lost work on that basis, and then we kick ourselves because we think we've overpriced rather than underpriced it. What's interesting when you start having a conversation with the clients, and we've undertaken quite a detailed review, client satisfaction, mystery shopping exercise with our clients, is just to try and to understand what they will pay for. And when you look at this, the bet the company situation, where you've got a major investment, an acquisition, et cetera, moving forward, clients are less price sensitive. They want to understand that we can help them manage the risk and give them best advice as the matter goes forward. That work is still for us on a hourly rate basis. We still have to make sure we've got the right blend of people on the job, but that's still on an hourly rate basis. Because we want to make sure as we go through the transaction, we're not getting challenges at a later stage from the client when he says or she says, the bill was much more than I expected. So there's a whole piece of initially talking them through and understanding what the work's about, and then there's the piece of actually taking them through what's happening on the job all the way through it. And that leads me into a point I'll talk about later on, which is legal project management, which you'll all have heard of. I personally refer to it as legal process management, because I think it's what we were doing. We've been doing it for years. It's what the industry's done. But we've just got to get it in a more structured way to get this to work. So in our business, we don't do commodity work, and I have no intention of putting us into that space. It's quite interesting because if you, and I've not got a slide for this, but if you track what happened from 2008 in terms of people qualifying, being trainees, etc., The in-house legal counsels took an awful lot more people in-house. So they've got a much better idea of how we price for work. And they're constantly challenging the pricing for work. So if you're not involved in sort of these tendering exercises or involved with large in-house counsel teams, it's fascinating how much data they have on what we do. It really is. And effectively, they can very much turn the model, as you just said, on its head effectively. And, you know, as long as it still works and you understand the basis of the profits and where you make a loss and where you make a profit, that's absolutely fine. I think what I've seen in the past is you're not ahead of the procurement curve. They do it to you, and then you're panicking because, like, I can't afford to lose that work because I've got a team of people here that if I lose the work, what do I do with them? And that's a real worry in the job I used to have, that was a real worry that we would have. In terms of going up the tree, companies will have all those types of work in them. It's just a question of what you actually take. So the options. I firmly believe that the way this works, and it's the same as the answer you gave us, which is we have to understand the value to the clients, which is a different kind of conversation with some clients that you may not know so well. Clients you've known with, and let's say we have SMEs that grew up over the last 20 years to where they are now. We know the business, we know what goes on, we're trusted advisors. But we're also now talking and networking with new firms. We have to understand them very quickly and understand where we can actually create value for them. We can't, and I keep talking about this, I was talking to the teams about this last night, we can't just assume we know the value based upon what we've done for somebody else. Because we're finding in our space that firms that we work with are different. Even in the manufacturing space, the service space, they are different. So we spend a lot of time at this point. Now, in my role, this fundamentally bothers me from a profit point of view because I can see the time on the clock mounting up while that's being worked through. We track all time from the point of client's initial discussion through to full acquisition. I know what the cost is of that. And that's particularly important to me because I need to actually start to understand what that acquisition cost is because ultimately I've got to factor it into my profit later on. Does anybody else track from those first business development conversations to when you acquire? Yeah, that's really encouraging because bizarrely, Irwin Mitchell, where I was, doesn't do that. They will spend all the money on business development, and then when you acquire the client, then the clock starts ticking, which is fascinating. I want to track it because I've got to get that to be much better. We have got to start asking more of the right questions. And being honest with you, we're still on that curve. We're still understanding that. We've got a lot of development to do with both recently qualifieds and 40-year qualifieds to get to the point where we need to on this one. Ultimately, there's a value chain within this transaction. So within the transaction, this has to work from the client's perspective and from our perspective. And we spend a lot of time trying to understand that because there is no good the client winning and us losing and vice versa. And the client has got to trust and appreciate what goes into the transactions and want to come back for more. There's no good winning a job and then not coming back. Our philosophy, as I say, 80% of our clients is repeat work. We acquire in our litigation contentious area, and then we get a lot of ongoing work for those companies going forward. We've got to understand that. So this is an interesting scenario, and this is a scenario I played out in my previous life. It is very much chicken and egg as to what comes first, because you've got two parts to this. You've got client service, which more and more of what we do is about. It's not just about price. And then you've got the commerciality of what we do. Now, from a commerciality point of view, I have a threshold profit margin that I wish to achieve on the firm, and then I have it by department. And departments' profits are at different levels depending on their evolution as a practice team. I have very small subscale teams, and I have very large teams that deliver me exactly where I want to be on profit for a mature business. But less mature, I can't expect them to deliver the same profit. So commercially, we're looking at this against each department, and then I then look at that and bulk it up to the actual practice overall. From a client service point of view, we're spending a lot of time understanding what the client wants, how it works from a client perspective, how it works from our perspective, so we know what we're delivering. So first couple of things to ask you really to take away is your practice truly client-focused? When I came into this industry 11 years ago from banking, banks always talked about customer service. I'll be honest with you, they kind of failed on that a few years later. But that was always what they talked about. I came into this industry and we talk about clients. So customer service in banks, clients where we are. But I've never really seen the client service point really coming through as strongly as it seems to be now, which we have to do. And so the question I then leave you with as well is, do you treat clients individually, or are they all the same? I can't answer that for you. You'll have a different client depending on what market you're in. Some clients may well be the same. I've always worked on this mantra, which is clients are really everything. If I don't have my clients, as much as some of them are easy to work with and some are not so easy to work with, I don't have a business. So this is the approach we now take in Berg. And to be honest with you, it's not just what I've put in, it's what Berg has been built on over the years. It's very much been the founding partners who've actually had that focus how it works. So from a profitability point of view, measurement is absolutely critical as to how you do this. Now, we'll all have the standard measures, profit per equity partner, profit per fee earner. They're standard measures. They tend to be the profit per equity partner is quoted. Everybody quotes that one. People don't quote the second one because it's not really in the report and accounts, but as an internal measure, it's particularly important. Because you can start to look at your leverage within the transactions to which people you've got actually on a job and what prices they're actually being charged at, and are you using the right mix of people. And you've got the scenario to play out, which is it's very easy to put your most experienced lawyer on a transaction to keep them busy, and they'll do the job in an hour, for example, whereas your less experienced may do it in 2 hours. But if your transaction is that the first person is being charged out at £400 an hour and the actual more junior person is being charged out at £140 an hour, you clearly have a situation where, from a cost to the client point of view, it's cheaper. The client gets a better deal from a cost point of view. Profit is also interesting because on the transaction I just told you about there, profit is still more profitable, even with supervision at the lower end. So there's still a leverage piece within this as to the mix within the teams. But you've got to look at the measures beyond just the first two. So I spend a lot of time looking at revenue per fee earner, utilisation rate, and chargeable rate per hour. So that's chargeable rate per hour words. I'm now spending a lot of time looking at this new measure, which is realised rate, which is chargeable rate minus recovered rate. This is a fascinating one for firms, I believe, of our size. I never bothered with it in Owen Mitchell. But for firms of our size, it's very easy just to keep putting our charging rate up because we think that's what the market has, but then find ourselves discounting quite heavily. You get the recovered rate. Well, you're kind of always chasing if you're not careful. It's a very quick way of measuring from an average perspective as to whether you're seeing the increases coming through on transactions, transaction to transaction, from department to department, and from team to team on certain transactions. So, does anybody work with realised rate at all? Okay. We as a firm have always worked with the first two and utilisation rate. That's what Berg's worked on for many, many years, and it's worked very well for that. Again, I've got the banking background, so I'm used to large operations, 400 people. You can only measure it on numbers. This industry is fascinating because the amount of data that's available to us is huge, and you can look at a lot of different measurements, but you've got to focus in on some certain ones to see the trends. So realised rate I'm starting to use and finding it very, very useful. And we've already started the same conversations, team in contentious to another team in contentious, and going, what's actually happening, because you've got the same type of work, but clearly something's going on. What I'm now realising is we are not having the right engagement with the clients, because it's quite clear we're sometimes treating clients the same. So despite everything I've said, we still have the philosophy of, I've done that type of work, litigation work before, we're going to do this one, it's exactly the same. It isn't, because the difference is the client in that transaction, and what they want out of it is different. It's not what the lawyers think. So, bit of point I said earlier on, there are 10,000 law firms active in 2016. That's stats from the beginning of this year. I was quite surprised, actually. I thought we'd dip below 10,000, but it's still there, we're still hovering. It's actually 10,100, and I think it's about 4 or something. That was the stat that I picked up. There definitely isn't a one-size-fits-all. And I think I'm hearing that from, obviously, the conversations we're having now. And the critical bit is now this point about aligning the business model to the chosen markets and clients. So that's the business strategy piece, but then the pricing, et cetera, and everything falls from that. So there are a number of pricing options. I ran out of space, so I stopped listing them, but all these exist in the market. You've got a push from a number of in-house counsel who accept that you're betting the company. We don't work with them, but I've spoken to them in previous life, betting the company, they don't want to go for hourly rates, but they're quite happy to go to a capped rate. You've got an awful lot of people who think you've got to immediately jump to one of these even at the bottom level in the transactions. I'll go back. So in terms of, I just realised I got a mistake on one of my slides. I must correct that. So in terms of that bottom level where it's basically the volume work, the commodity work, it's got a fixed price that goes with it. I have seen middle to top people pricing for work purely based upon what the other firm is quoting. The classic conversation, which I'm sure we've all had, is, well, I can get the same job done down the road and they'll do it for £5,000 less. So the immediate reaction of some is to discount down to at least 5,000 less of what the original quote was, with no thought about why they've done that. The difference in 2009-10 was literally, I firmly believe, you've got capacity, you've got to fill up the capacity, you don't not laying off staff, so it's okay on this instance. The problem is that stays. What I've seen happen more recently is people jump to the next price to win the work with no thought about how the other side is delivering the work. And what I'm starting to see an awful lot, and having sat in the operational role as I have done and looked at how processes are designed, and I'll go on to that in a second, when you design the process, you put your own technologies and own approaches around that process. And therefore, your price is about your business and what you can deliver. So you've got to have a proper, robust conversation with the client to really understand why the price is going down. You can't always do that. Sometimes it literally is procurement-led and the price is the price. That's just how it works. And you have to make a decision whether you walk away or stay with it. But in all of these models, our ability to compete directly on price is actually very, very difficult, because we all operate different businesses. We have different expectations on profits, we have different expectations on investment, and at the same time, we've got new entrants coming into the market who are delivering law very differently without the fixed overheads that we're carrying. So it's a challenge. What the challenge that this presents, though, is it means that we've got to keep reinventing our business models. So the very simple dynamic that I'll work from now is really there's a price certainty that clients want, but this price certainty comes in a number of disguises. It's not just about price, it's about the quality of what's coming with it. There's also a profitability piece. So you've got to make sure we're getting the right profits, you've got the right overlap so that your clients and equity partners or owners of the business, perhaps is a better description these days, actually are getting the returns that they expect. So I've spent a lot of time in this space, and this leads me into the legal project management, or legal process management as I call it, because everything I've spoken about so far is about the inputs. It's about understanding the client. This is about qualifying what the work is and what the outcome is for the client. And as part of the planning piece, making sure we put the right resource onto that work. That will drive the revenue. So we're only talking about revenue at this stage. There are three parts to the legal process, and this is my very simplistic view of legal process, dumbed down to it's got three parts. Okay, I've read a textbook very recently who says there's five. Okay, I don't agree. I think there are three. The three are case inception. So, are you incepting the case in the correct way? Are you getting the right information, which you should have done on the left, the initial input? And are you using the right resource to price and deliver the work? You've then got the fee earner process. Now, fee earner process has changed over the years, but it's still the same in that are you getting the right inputs from the first stage to enable you to get on with the job? Because at this stage, in a structure within an organisation, left hand, far left hand, is probably somebody fairly senior in some of the high-value transactions. The case inception is probably done by more junior staff to incept the case on the systems. And then you've got, right, we've now got the fee earner, we've now got the more expensive resources doing the job, whether it's one person, two person, 10 people, whatever. That's where your cost is, and that's where leverage comes into play in terms of have you got the right people doing the work to deliver the profit? And are they of the right skill doing it, and you're getting the outcome you wanted? Too often, the left-hand person will do all those stages. So the person who acquires the work will still incept the work through their secretary, if you still have secretaries, but with their secretary, and they'll do the work. and you've got to question whether that's giving you the profit you actually want. And then you've then got the closure process, which is you getting the right amounts of cash in, you're recovering what you should be recovering, and are you discounting from it? So the measurement for me is are you recovering what you thought you would recover on the left-hand side? Are you delivering a satisfied client? Is the client going to come back to you for more work? Do you measure at that point? As I say, we measure we send a questionnaire out on every closing of a transaction. We send on the longer transactions, we'll have a questionnaire going out during the transaction, or depending on the size, we'll have a phone call from an independent client partner who may have originally acquired the work, but they've had no involvement in actually delivering the work as it's gone through. We're trying to measure and understand what's happening within the transaction from a client's point of view. And you've got to look back, and this is where the crossover goes from process design into project management, because have you got the right resource on the transaction? And are you delivering what the market expects you to deliver in the first place? So the problem with existing processes is, if you do it in the way we've always done it, is we've got profit leakage, we've got client dissatisfaction. My 80% of clients who come back to small work, on one hand I look at it and go, that's fantastic, I'm really pleased with that. It actually causes me another issue, because we've still got to have a hunger to get more work and grow the firm. We can't just rest on our laurels and just think, well, it's all going to come from existing clients, because it will. But it's not going to give me the growth that I actually want, because I've still got a cost base that's increasing all of the time. And I've also got the need to actually develop the people within my business and give them the career opportunities, because they cost me a lot to require, train, and retain. So legal project management, or legal process management, is effectively, again, not my model. You've got 4 stages, so very similar to the process design module that I just talked about. You've got the initial scoping and negotiate stage. You've got the need to estimate and plan what's going to happen. And then you've got to deliver and evaluate. Now, client involvement in the left-hand side is very high. So we have a lot of time with the client understanding what it is that they actually would like, what they want from it. The estimating and planning at the moment is quite an internal function. We spend a lot of time structuring the transaction to understand what the various phases of the transaction are going to be. J-codes have given us a big steer on the contentious side of that, because we very much have a structure defined for us. But we're looking at what resource we have per stage and what we expect to charge for that stage. We go out to the client with a statement to say to the client, the transaction will run through these stages, and this is what the cost will be based upon the information you've provided with at this stage. That's in the letter of engagement that goes to a client. And what we will generally do is we will talk that through with the client on the larger transactions. We then go through the process of delivering the work. And the delivery piece is very much in a number of stages. You've got the phases, and you know what you're going to do in those phases. So you've gone through that, you've costed it. What we go back to the client with, and we're going to increase the frequency of this, but we go back to the client and say to the client, right, well, we said stage 1 was going to cost you £5,000. Well, actually, it's coming at 4,800, or it's coming at 4,000. Great. We're going to the next stage, but based on what we found at first stage, second stage is going to now cost you more than we originally estimated. So let's just talk you through what that means. The overall position, end position, still looks to be about the same. Okay? And we go through that conversation. We've got a large case at the moment, which we're running. We have at the moment just over £1 million of work in progress that we're underwriting ourselves on the matter. And we have a conversation with that client. It was every month, it then went to every 2 weeks, so we're now preparing for trial. We're now speaking to them literally every 2 days, 2 or 3 days. The client is very happy where we've got to, because they're having this dialogue with us. That's really encouraging, because it also means that when I'm looking at my recovery at the end of it, I'm fairly confident what I'm going to get back if we are successful, which I really hope we will be on those sort of fees. But we've applied this as well to small transactions. We will do this on a corporate transaction. And we've done it on a corporate transaction, and we do it on a fixed fee corporate transaction because we have them. 50% of us have, that's one of the big pressures we've got. The corporate transactions, we go through the same process, but actually we spend an awful lot of time looking at ourselves at the end. We're looking at ourselves as we go through, but looking at ourselves to see why is it that we've delivered that and it's cost us more than we expected, because we can only charge the fixed fee. So why is it? It's not the client's fault. We've done something wrong, and what we tend to find is we've missed something at the initial scoping stage we didn't realise, or when we've actually gone through the transaction and the other side, so maybe one of you in the room, I don't know, but the transactions become much more complicated than we ever expected. You've got two conversations going on between two corporate lawyers who are arguing over one particular point of the contract that really adds not a lot of value, but unfortunately we're suffering for that as a business because we've given a fixed fee. Now we will, on occasion, we've just completed a transaction for a sale of a chain of properties in the retail sector, and that transaction became incredibly complicated because of one landlord who held a number of those properties that we were trying to basically negotiate ourselves from. And we had to go back to the client and says, look, we can do nothing on this. We have to talk to you because this is just going longer. We had the conversation. Client says, fine, okay. In the scheme of things, I'm happy to pay what this now looks like. We've done that. We've also had to stand the cost ourselves in other cases because we failed to manage some of the conversations that are going on. I'm not a lawyer, but I do have to say that some of the conversations that go on between certain years of qualification really don't add the huge value to the client. So we've got to work with that, I think, between ourselves because both sides are probably suffering from the same issue. Because given the point about fixed fees, they're all increasing. So all the way through this, client communication is really, really key. And I'm really passionate about this piece, as you can probably tell, because the outcome of getting that wrong is the client complaint or a discounted bill or a client who's not going to come back to you for more work. It's a real piece that we are constantly drilling into the team to say, please speak to the clients. In one area, we're about to introduce weekly client statements and updates, which some of you probably already do, but we're literally going to go out every Friday. There will be a statement going out to the client to say exactly where we are in the transaction, where the costs are. We would like to get to the stage where that's complete with all the narrative that would go on the final bill as well, but we're not at that stage yet. But that's where we get to. And I'm working that into this business because I saw that very successfully delivered from the corporate team that I used to be involved with at Owen Mitchell, who would, in London every Friday, send out a statement, absolutely rigorously every Friday, prepared for them, off the system, it'd go out every Friday. They never had a cost challenge on a bill, ever. They never had a complaint on that team. It's fascinating when you compare them to others. So I'm really, having tested that, I know that that's going to give us some success. And ultimately, it's about setting and managing the expectations and negotiating the change with the client. If you've told them what you're going to do, and you know how much that's going to cost you with the resource you're going to apply to it, you can have that conversation on a fairly open basis with the clients. Our clients are highly successful entrepreneurs in the main who've done very, very well for themselves. The reason they've done well for themselves is that they've been very hard at negotiating their fees on any transactions they've ever been involved in, not just in the legal sector, in anywhere. You will have similar clients. We've given too much away to those clients in the past, but we're finding by having these conversations that they're actually now accepting what we're saying. So, the critical part of getting this in place, and it goes back to the panel session earlier, although I'm not sure how much it was really said, because we talked about the Derbies and Knights situation. What was clear for me with the Knights acquisition of Derbies, however they did it, and the timescales are, to me, irrelevant, they had a very clear plan of what they were going to do from a change programme point of view. And it went in and they delivered what they wanted for themselves. I don't know the outcome for some people. But you've got to have a very clear change programme. It has to be delivered from the top. It can't be something that's just an initiative at a junior level. It has to come from the top, like any change leadership programmes. A big part of our training at the moment is on client service, but a huge part is the commerciality. To try and get these figures and numbers to people and show them what the discounting means. If you discount at the beginning of a transaction to win the work, the clients will come back and try discounting at the end. Now, you might leave yourself some margin to do that, but I've seen it too often where that doesn't happen. And the discounting at the end causes a problem. If you invoice on a regular basis with your statements, which is what we do on some of our transactions, discounting off the last bill doesn't cause us a real concern if we have to do it. But a lot of transactions, we have to wait to the end because of where the funds are, etc. So we've got to get the commerciality into our teams. I've got a great finance director who is very, very keen to get stuck into this with the business and with the teams. And he ran his first session with our commercial litigation team about a month ago, and they invited him back last Thursday just to go over some pointers that they'd worked through. And that's really helping us because we're starting to understand what it's properly like at the grassroots level. I can't stress that enough. The problem is, and back to your comment earlier on, is the data and the numbers all over our businesses, but actually we've got to share it with a lot of people that are quite junior level. What's quite interesting is the trainees, the newly qualified that I've got, are learning an awful lot of this at law school now. It's coming out of their qualifications. It was never taught to some of our more qualified people. But in all of this, we have to keep it really simple, because this is in addition to the job of doing legal work. So we have to keep it as simple as possible. J-codes make a massive difference to us. Everybody's familiar with J-codes, I assume, if you're doing contentious work? Yeah. I assume so. It's created a discipline that was much needed in the contentious area, but we've been able to take the philosophy and apply it to the non-contentious. And the other part is the data. The amount of data that exists within your practice management system, I find is amazing. And having spent a lot of time in the past and now spending a lot of time on this, there's an awful lot of information you can get from it, and you can learn from a pricing point of view for future transactions. The only issue is the quality of what was going on in the past. You just have to be sure that you were measuring, A, the same thing, and whether your time capture, etc., was as accurate as it needs to be. Because when you get to this new model, your time capture's got to be absolutely spot on. Because you've got to make sure that, yeah, you're creating the profits you actually need. So we've invested in a business intelligence piece of software that sits over our practice management system. It was invested in before I joined. And that gets a huge amount of data out, but it lets us find the anomalies in the business where things aren't happening where they should be happening. So from a lawyer practice area head level, all the data's at their fingertips. We've now presented the data at a junior level from January. All the data that's available to us in terms of how a matter runs is now available at the fee earner level. So they can look at themselves and they can compare themselves to people in their teams. That's now available to them. That's taking a lot of time to get them to actually start to use it, but those who are all switched on are now starting to think, well, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this work? Because the price I've been given at the outset by the more senior partner is never going to be delivered at the price that this is going to take. So you've got lots of those conversations. It's creating a bit of a tension within the practice teams, but the only way this will work is if the people getting the work understand that they're getting it and they can make a profit on it. Because ultimately all the other measures are about them creating a profit. So if you haven't looked at your practice management system, there's a lot of stuff in there. I'm not sure I'd invest in a business intelligence software again. It's great, gives lots of data, but I still believe we could probably got a lot of it out ourselves if we'd understood what we got at a practice management level. But it's good, I've got lots of reports, and I can use that. So, this is a continuous exercise, so make sure the data you've got is actually data that you can rely on within the system. The market will keep forcing us to change. And at the end of the day, as Charles Darwin said, it's not the strongest of us that will survive. It's those that can adapt more closely. So that brings me to an end.